Welcome back everybody to the fourth video in the series. This time we are going to be diving a little bit deeper into the animation controller we have been looking at for a while now. We're going to add our own state, and I'll show you how to do that, as well as get this character an attack, and how to trigger those animations and states in code. So we're finally going to get a little bit of code. Won't be too many lines, don't be scared, but a very quick and easy way to get this thing working. So let's start off by going back to this animator controller. You click on the third person controller on the animator, double click that, it'll get you back to this window just in case you lost it. We're going to right click in the empty space, create state, and create an empty state. We will click on the state and let's rename it attack. I want to give our ninja a way to fend off the zombie here. The motion is none at the moment because we don't really have an attack animation. So let's go dive back into Mixamo. We have our zombie still here. He's dancing around. And let's go back to our ninja character. We don't have to go back to the ninja character. I just like to see how it looks with the preview animation. So how is he going to attack? We don't really have a weapon yet, but when I think of like a ninja, I think of like a ninja star, like throwing like a shuriken. So let's look for a good throwing animation that we could maybe add a projectile to later. So there's a couple throwing ones. These all don't really make sense, but this one caught my eye up here in the right, this frisbee throw. So that's kind of like they're kind of like little frisbees, I guess. A little slow though, so what we can do is we can adjust this animation in Mixamo over here on the right. You can do this for all of them. They have different fields to adjust, but for this one, let's crank up the overdrive because we're gonna nice quick flick of the wrist for these things. Maybe a little faster even. Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice quick flick of the wrist. Okay. Let's see what this arm space does. We drop it down. Keeps it tighter to his body and he throws it lower. And this probably does the opposite. Nice wide throw. Okay, so let's try to level that off. Maybe eye level. Maybe a little lower. That looks pretty good. Total frames, we're going to go 0 to 100. That's from 0 to 100% of the entire animation, and we're going to click download. We're going to download without skin this time because we don't need to duplicate those files. Keep it at FBX for Unity and download. We're going to make sure this goes into our project files. Oh, I did a little bit of housekeeping here. Now I have a game folder and an imports folder just to keep things organized. So in game, it's going to be our animation folder we had before. And let's go to ninja throw. Okay, back into Unity. You can see what I mean by the housekeeping. I dropped everything into imports and game to keep them separated because they're going to be scripts that were imported and a little bit of redundant names. So I separated those and now we have our own scripts file that we will be using. So in animation where we downloaded it, we have ninja throw. Let's open the animation. Right off the bat, he's halfway through the world, so you know something's wrong. We need to go up and edit like we have been doing. Let's quickly switch this name to throw. Click our rig, go from generic to humanoid, And on their avatar definition, we want to copy from another avatar this time, since we don't have a model associated with it on the download. And we're going to go into our characters and our ninja here that we've been using. We're going to bring his avatar in just to make sure everything lines up and hit apply. Go back to animation. Now he's standing in the right spot and that looks pretty good. Okay. We'll give that a shot. So how are we going to make him do this? As you see, everything else has these arrows between each of them, and these are the transitions. So if we click on this transition towards airborne, there is a condition here that says it must be on the ground to become airborne, which makes sense. And then from airborne, you must either be on the ground or jumping. And then from crouching, you must be crouched to get back to grounded. So how we do this is we're going to take from grounded with it clicked, we're going to right click, make transition, and I'll give you this little arrow. We're going to snap it to attack and left click there. Then with attack highlighted, left click on it. And then we're going to right click, make transition. Same thing, back to grounded. And now we have our loop. So now we need something to trigger it in code. For the grounded blend tree, we have these forward, turn, crouch, jump to transition between those. We need something for attack. And these parameters are what's going to be called in code. So let's add a trigger and call this trigger attack. And this is a on and off switch, so we are either attacking or not. And we want this attack to happen on the transition in to the animation. So under conditions now, when we add a condition, attack should be in this drop-down menu. And now when we trigger attack, it will trigger the animation. We want to set has as exit time to false because there's no exit time going into the animation. However, on the way out, on this out arrow, we want it to have exit time because that is exiting back to grounded from this animation. Okay, so that's all set up. Now we get to use a little bit of code. So now we need to add this to our character in a script. So on our third person controller, we're going to go over to add component, scroll down to new script. We're going to call this the combat script that is going to control all of his combat. Hit enter. This script should show up in our assets. And let's drag it to scripts. Now that it's where it's supposed to be, let's open this up. And this will open up Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code for me. Okay, so how are we going to get this to work? What do we need to call? What do we need to use for our triggers? What we're going to do is, we know we need to access the animator. So let's make a variable of type animator called anim. That should work. Animator. That might trigger something else. Let's just say anim. On start, we want anim to equal get component of type animator on this character. So this script's going to be attached to our character controller, so it has access to this animator. And then once that is set, then we want a button input. So I like left click, big fan of that for attacking. Let's say if input dot get mouse button down. We'll use key code 0 for the left click. Then anim.set trigger to a string, calls in a string, and that string is going to be whatever we named the parameter. So in this case, we named it attack. So I'm going to copy that. Every time I'm using strings, I want to copy it exactly, even though it's just the word attack. It is case sensitive. And set trigger attack. So that should be all we need. Let's Control S to save and head back to Unity. One thing we need to do before we try to make this work is this state we set as attack. We have not attached the motion to it, so let's go grab that from our original throw animation we've edited and drop it in there. Okay, now let's play it and give it a try. Turn it around and left click, and he does do the attack. All right, so he's doing a little off to the side, and I can show you why. We want him to be facing forward. So back in the throw animation, I always double click that. We're going to go to edit, and under the animation tab, we're going to scroll down a little bit, and he's kind of it's kind of going with his rotation, and like his body orientation. What body orientation does is it keeps his upper body pointing forward, but the animation's kind of going off to the side. So that's why you saw him kind of throwing it out to the side. So what we're going to want to do is go back to original, and this keeps the rotation as it is authored in the source file. So how the animation was meant to be played, and then we're going to bake this rotation into his pose so he's not rotating off the side and throwing it in the wrong direction. So with those changes, I'm gonna hit apply, and let's try this again. Now he is throwing it forward and throwing it over there. He's facing that way and throwing it that direction. Perfect. Okay. So real quickly, I'll just go over this a little bit again in the inspector. Sometimes your animations will look a little off. If a lot of the times you can notice by leveling out their feet. This one's pretty stable, but sometimes the animation calls for a lot of movement. I'm sure we can edit the zombie walk a little bit. If you bake into pose the root transformation X and Z, that will keep him from deviating off his path. And if you bake in the Y, it'll keep him from doing too much movement up and down. So these are a couple little things you can change, mess around with it, see what works for you, and as well as you can cut down animation times. But I think it looks good where it is right now. Okay, so for the next video, we are going to attach a projectile to this animation, and we're going to look at animation events, which is what I think the coolest part about all of this animation stuff, because we can pause this animation and say, okay, where is he going to throw this star out of? And I think it's right about there. So what we're going to be able to do with animation events is say, when this animation hits that point, do this. And that's where we're going to get to play a little bit more with the code and show you how to implement that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.